So many people in our group have said that they found their we in recovery, which is like what they couldn't find before. It's just like, oh my God, that means I can't even explain what that means to me. So just knowing that I need genuine human connection, I really didn't know that I needed it. I isolated so much before, and these meetings have really brought me a way to focus on myself in a healthy way. And I don't really struggle with wanting to take drugs every day anymore. I struggle with my addiction in other ways, with sex and love and relationship. And being able to come back to these meetings and say, I didn't go meet up with him like I wanted to or whatever, and be honest with them, that just means everything to me. I'm just growing. Like without this group, I don't know that I'd be growing as much as I am.
Hey there, super sober heroes. It's your host, Sober Steve, the podcast guy, here with another amazing episode of Gay A, the Super Sober Hero Show. I am so psyched to share with you the interview I had earlier this week with the girls from the Swift Steps. But before we get into that, I am happy to report that I am 1,102 days sober from drugs and alcohol. Thank God, one day at a time. And today I am grateful for the awesome week I had last week celebrating my 3 years sober. And I'm grateful for the amazing time I had last week celebrating my 3rd year sober. I had strep throat during the week, which hampered some of my plans, but I still managed to have a nice socially distanced and isolated outdoor beach day on my sober birthday. Got to go out and eat outside for dinner with my husband and had an amazing meal. And it was a great sober birthday, hitting number 3 and being able to reflect back on what these past 3 years have changed in my life, because it's been so much. And I also celebrated on Instagram with all of the listeners who follow me on there and had an Ask Me Anything. And so for those of you who don't follow on Instagram, I'll share some of the key topics or things that we discussed on my anniversary through Instagram, through stories. The first question that I had received was, which step did I struggle with the most? And my answer was, and still is, the 4th step, the first time through. It took me a while, and I thought that I dug so deep and did all the work that there would ever possibly need to be done in my 4th step. And before too long, and as I've had more time under my belt, I realized I barely scratched the surface as more things come to light, and as I remember more, and as I dig deeper. And so I'm very grateful the second time around to be spending more time on step 4, digging real deep and unearthing some things that didn't come up the first time around. That's why we do these more than once if we're doing the steps. And another question was about how do I define happiness today, which was very difficult for me to think about because happiness was very superficial the way that I viewed it before sobriety. And I also was very confused over why everyone else seemed to be so happy while I was so miserable inside. And I had to really think back because I am very happy now on a regular basis, but I was trying to define what that happiness feels like or when I'm feeling it the most. And what I came to is that I'm feeling it the most when I'm really just trusting the process, when I'm living in the 2nd and 3rd step, knowing that I'm not God. I can't control the world around me. I can't control the people around me. I can't control the things around me. I am just needed to show up to every situation that I can, doing the best that I possibly can. And as long as I'm doing that and keeping my side of the street clean, I just need to have trust and faith that everything will work out. And when I'm doing that, the best is when I'm at my happiest. That's why, and that's a constant state where sometimes we trust the process a little bit more than others. Sometimes we want to grab the wheel a little bit tighter. Other times we feel a little more comfortable trusting that, we can let go a little bit and relax our grip. But that's definitely the way that I define happiness right now, is when I'm kind of in that perfect kind of cruise control sense of just trusting the process of my life and that everything will work out as long as I keep being me. And also we talked about the 3 key principles. Those were things that I said were vital to my recovery. The first of which is not comparing myself negatively against other people's recovery, not looking up to everyone being like, oh my God, that person's recovery is so perfect, or it's so much better than mine, or putting myself down for the fact that I might work a different program or it might look differently than other people's, and not being hard on myself in that aspect. While also on the flip side, number 2 was to not get judgmental. We've all seen bitter old queens in meetings. We call them old timers in 12-step programs, but a lot of the people who have been in a lot of times forget that judgment piece. And I've heard someone who would complain that newcomers would raise their hand in meetings to share. And it was just like they thought that they knew so much better than everyone else, like these people, because they have more time. And it just mystifies me because I know that I can learn a lot from people with less time than me, just as much as I can with people from more time than me and people who are different programs. And I try and keep a very open mind from where I can get things. And I try not to judge others. There's enough of that in the real world that I hope that most of the time, most interactions in these rooms and in these recovery spaces are safe and free of judgment. That's what makes them so beautiful generally. So we want to avoid the people who do get judgy about what other people's lives and recovery and programs look like. Like if they're not my sponsor or my higher power or myself, it doesn't matter. So avoid being judgy, avoid comparing yourself, and then also it was avoid like limiting yourself. I was very big, even my first 2 years of when I found something that worked, I was like, well, this is how it's always going to be. And if I tried something and it didn't work, I was like, well, I'm never doing that again. And it became not only the way that I was approaching my recovery, but the rest of my life as well. And it became very limiting and restricting. And I started to feel suffocated. And so it was only in the past 6 months where I stopped saying things like always and never, I can't do that, or it'll never happen for me, or what would people think, and all those types of limiting thoughts and beliefs, and kind of just crumpled them up, threw them out the window. And there's been a lot of changes since then that have been really super awesome. So it's been working for me, living by those 3 key principles. So there was more to review, but at the same time, that's also why you want to be following me on Instagram at Gay A Podcast. I am on all the socials, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. You can find episode announcements and big content there. But if you want to get involved in the day-to-day discussion, that's where it's at. It's Instagram and Instagram stories. We even been talking about some controversial things like gray areas of recovery, and everyone always has thoughts and opinions, and it's super exciting because I used to be terrified about making waves or asking questions, or I wanted everyone to ever listen to this podcast to think that like this is perfect. And I realized that you can make everyone happy all the time for everything, even when it comes to sobriety, which is wild because we're all rooting for the same thing to help each other stay sober. But I want to make sure that I'm asking fun, engaging questions and having conversations and not shying away from things. And speaking of not shying away from things, that is a great way to transition over to the interview I had with these 2 amazing women from the Swift Steps, Jules and Emily. I will pass you over to myself from yesterday with the interview that I had. Enjoy. All right. Hey there, everyone. It's Sober Steve here with Jules and Emily from the Swift Steps. Hey, ladies.
Hi.
Yes, and I am so excited to get into a little bit about what you do before we get into more about the true of you. So what would you say? How would you say the Swift Steps? What are they for someone who doesn't know?
So there aren't any steps in Swift Steps. Swift Steps is a group of Swifties where we come together and we share our challenges and we share our triumphs and we share hope and we share all about our recovery journeys, no matter what that recovery journey is, whether it has to do with alcohol or drugs or toxic familiar relationships or codependency, whatever it is, whatever your struggles are. If you're a Swiftie and you feel comfortable with other Swifties, you'll likely like the vibe of our meetings and feel connected and want to share and support one another. And that's kind of what we've been doing.
That's awesome. And I love it because I'm very big on the podcast that even though I use the 12-step program that's my life as my primary method of recovery, I also dabble in all the other methods out there because I feel like it's kind of like this whole world is like a shopping cart where you could just take what you want and put in your cart and you can like put the stuff you don't like back on the shelf and leave it for someone else who wants it because someone else will like it just fine. But that everyone's recovery is valid and that all of our journeys look differently. How did you 2 meet?
So that's a funny story. Actually, Emily's mom was my boss. And she had mentioned that her daughter had gone through some traumatic things and told me about one of them. And I was like, okay, like, I feel like I'm going to get this kid and this kid will get me. And I reached out to her on MySpace, believe it or not. And we started chatting through there. And then we just kind of became close. And I was more like this older sister. And she was kind of like this almost like bratty little kid. And that was kind of the relationship that we had over the years. And then over the last 5 years, we're kind of in that same like age bracket where you're checking off like that 35 mark. And we're doing a lot of the same life things. And now we're just kind of like, now more like sisters and not like an older, younger sister thing, So that's how we met, but that's how our relationship has grown over time.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how the dynamic has shifted because I can imagine how, like, when you're younger and you're a teenager, having 4 or 5 years of an age difference can feel like a lot in terms of being able to give someone else advice and have that kind of older, younger sibling or mentor role, and how it shifts, though, when you're in your 30s, to kind of age leveled out pretty quickly once we're all adulting the same way.
Mhm.
And why don't we dive in a little bit about what your journey with alcohol or whatever your journey was about you where you are today?
So I grew up in a household with my mother and my father both being heroin addicts. And everybody in my family struggled with addiction in some form. And so my childhood was quite tumultuous, and I grew up hating and vilifying anybody who struggled with substance use disorder. And I truly believed that it was a choice until opiates set my ass straight, basically. I went to the doctor for an injury and I thought, these are just being prescribed in an office. It's not a big deal. Oh, I like how they feel. Okay, well, when it's time to stop, I'll just stop taking them. It's not that hard. Like, it's a choice, right? Like, and if it's that bad, I'll go to rehab. I'm strong. I have willpower. And it's just not how it goes. And so I struggled for a very long time. And at some point, I was given a choice to save my job, and I went to treatment. And while I was there, I was kind of just like, I'm gonna hide it better when I get out. Like, I need money to buy my drugs. So, yeah, I'm going to keep my job. I'm going to do what I have to do there. But I went to treatment. And while I was there, thankfully, I had like a couple, for me, they're not God moments, but they were like moments of clarity. People call them God moments. And I just knew that I wanted to do that. And I did. And I have been sober ever since. Yeah. So that's kind of my journey with substances, but like opiates and benzos were my jam. And my mom and I were both in active addiction together, and we manipulated one another. And it was just like this really cyclical, terrible, over and over and over of the insanity type stuff. It was pretty crazy, but I'm happy where I am now.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm glad you're happy where you are now. And Emily, tell us a little bit about your journey.
Sure. So when I was younger, I had three older half siblings that were my father's children, but not my mother's children. The youngest of those three was is Jules' age, would be Jules' age now. When I was 11, she was maybe 19 or 20, and she was using drugs from a young age, like through high school. And when she was 19 or 20, she had an infection from I don't know what she was injected.
IVs.
Yeah, IV. And so she got an infection from that went to her heart, and she passed away from that infection. So when I was in fourth grade, a year before this happened, I wrote an essay on why drug use is bad and why people should not do this. And my father told me that I should show this to my sister. And I was like, why? Like, she's not, she knows what she's doing. She doesn't need this. I had no idea what was going on. And so then when she passed away, I carried a lot of guilt with me. Like, what if her little sister showed her this? And what if this would have changed her mind? And I don't think that it would have. But as a child, I think I hold like, oh my God, I could have done something and I chose not to, even though I didn't really know that this was the problem. And then she passed away, and that's when I found out about her problem. So I found out about her passing and her whole history at one time. I've carried that with me. There was some resentment about people who used drugs for a few years after that. But more in my adulthood, I understand that it's not a choice. And I understand that this isn't something people want to be doing. Like, they want it in the moment, but this isn't like a life that they want, or it really is an addiction. So being part of Swift Steps helps me connect with her since I didn't know her at that time, because I was too young to know what was going on. So this really helps me get to know her in a sense through other people doing the same thing, to be like, what was her life like? Because they can tell me a little bit about their life and I can kind of fill in what her life could have been like and how much trouble we were all going through, and all of these siblings handled it differently, and was her path, unfortunately. So this group is changed my life in a way to like connect with her, and Jewel being what her age would be now is like so special, and it's like almost filling in that absence I've had for so long.
Thank you for sharing that. And I definitely love how oftentimes I've even joked in my like in my recovery, like looking at other people who aren't alcoholics or who aren't addicts. And I was like, I wish there was like a 12-step program or a recovery program for them just to learn how to like be a person, because I feel like so much of what we get from like community is like realizing that when we're all sharing authentically what we're going through, what we're struggling with, what we're even doing well with, and like celebrating the successes as well as commiserating over the struggles, makes us all realize that we're not all as unique and special and alone as we thought that we were before. Like in a way that like it's beautiful because it also makes us feel more connected to each other. So taking your stories from where you were to where you are now with Swift Steps, when did that become an idea and how did it become a reality?
I've had a TikTok for a couple of years. I guess during the pandemic, I got on TikTok and I just realized that there was like a whole other community that I had like no idea about. And I didn't know about them being open to medical marijuana and harm reduction and like all of these things that really kind of blew my mind. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. But I didn't see it like in person anywhere in meetings. I still kind of saw the same thing in meetings. And anyway, I just kept making recovery content. And I gained a little bit of a following and I knew I wanted to do something with it, but I wasn't sure what. I wanted to help other people with their recovery, but I knew I didn't want to go back to school. So the quickest, most expeditious route to make sure that I had some training was become a peer specialist. So I was going to be a recovery mentor. Started a business called Blank Space Recovery, and I was going to hold drop-in meetings for Swift Steps for sober Swifties. And it turned into Swift Steps and it took off, basically. I had this thought where it would be really cool to have the same vibe that Emily and I felt at a Taylor Swift concert, like outside at the stadium. We couldn't get tickets. We couldn't get in. We were just outside with everybody else. It was so safe, so supportive, so accepting. Like I never felt so physically, bodily safe and so like emotionally, spiritually, like all the ways safe. And it felt like the closest to Barbie Land we were ever going to get. So like we were like, let's host these like Swift Step meetings. And then that just became the thing. Like that just blew up. And so White Space Recovery became like, okay, that's like I have to focus on this thing now because this is what people like clearly want and are needing. And so we just started nurturing that. And it started with it just being for sober Swifties, but now it is a recovery community recovery community for Swifties, not sober Swifties. It's all Swifties, just like going through the daily experience of like being a human on this earth is just trying to like get through another day with whatever chemical imbalances we have, with whatever mental health challenges we have, like with whatever shit it is that we struggle. We're all just trying to like get through another day. And I feel like you said, wouldn't it be great if there were meetings for people who didn't have a substance use disorder where they could learn how to like do life? So I feel like at our meetings, we get to kind of do that. And also we get to talk about all different kinds of recovery. And you're allowed to talk about harm reduction and you're allowed to come to meetings if you've relapsed or even if you're loaded. Like that's when you need to share the most. So anyway, that's kind of like how it snowballed and where we got to now.
Yeah, and tell me a little bit more about whether it was that moment at the Swift concert or just Taylor Swift music in general. How has that shaped your lives and touched your recovery?
So me and Emily are very good friends, and we went to the 1989 together, and we were like planning for months, like, are we going to get tickets? When are we going to buy the tickets? back then you could still get them day of, and we did. And we were against the stage, and it was like the best show. It was so amazing. We had the best time. And that I was in active addiction. I was high that night. I definitely was taking pills. I remember dropping one on the floor or on the ground, Emily, and I picked it up and you were like, "Are you gonna take that?" And I was like, "No." Turned around and popped that shit. I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm not leaving it." But anyway, yeah, that night was so fun and it meant so much to me because 1989 really helped that album help me get up every single day to fight another day, like going through withdrawal without medication, without my drug of choice, whatever it is, and like being in pain because I have fibromyalgia and my addiction does coincide with my pain. I'm like, I can't use opiates to cope with that anymore. But then like 1989, just like a pep in my step. I can't really explain it to you. It just like gave me this like move, keep going to be able to walk through the disgusting concourse and like make it to the building or work in that another 8 hours to get home and just try to fight another day. And then, over the last little bit, Taylor's really exploded. And I moved back in with my mom and my sister because I'm recently separated. My sister has recently become a huge Swiftie over the Eras tour, watching a bunch of stuff on TikTok. And so it's just become just like fully a part of my life. And I just connect with her music and like all of the toxic breakup songs, I could relate them all to my drug addiction, every single one of them. That toxic dance of like, am I going to stop? Can I stop? I don't want to stop. I need to like all of that. So yeah, Taylor Swift is just like everything and runs a different part of my life. But yeah, that's how she relates for me. How about you?
Well, she's been a huge part of our life since 1989, the album, and we've been obsessed since. But more recently with our meetings, like her lyrics always meant a lot to us, and we would talk about them individually. But now every Saturday we have a song or a lyric prompt meeting, and we break down each song or lyric and how it relates to our recovery and whichever situation we're in. And someone's perspective is always different, and it's really interesting to hear how each song relates to everybody, and we all love it for different reasons and like feel it in our heart in a different way.
Yeah, those are my favorite meetings.
I can only imagine. I could totally vibe with that because I know, like, with music in general, just you mentioned like breakup songs is one of the things people think of when they think of like Taylor Swift, especially. It's like, oh, all of her breakup songs. But it's like when I ended my relationship with alcohol, like that was the longest relationship I'd ever had with anything, like longer than with people. Like it was in my life longer than like through relationships and friendships and family issues and everything like that. I always had alcohol. And so like now that I look back, when I was in it, I didn't realize that I considered it such an important part of my life or such an important relationship that I was having. But I now, like, when I do listen to breakup songs, I can hear, yeah, it was a relationship that I really had to end. So with Swift Steps, what's one thing that you learned about your recovery journey that you wouldn't have learned if you weren't doing Swift Steps?
I'll go first. I'm in recovery for other things, like not drugs or alcohol, but like codependency and toxic relationships. And I have a lot of mental illness, so I'm constantly recovering. There wasn't a space for people to go to in mental health recovery like there is with this group. And I didn't know I needed that until we started doing it. And so many people can relate to the feelings of addiction or disappointment or codependency with alcohol or people or anything. And what it's brought me is like connection to this group of people that I never thought I would fit in, but I do. And it's really like my people, and they get me, it's like brought me to these people that I never would have thought I would have related to. Like, oh, they're an addict. Why would I relate to that? But it's like we can all relate to that in some sense. And I didn't really realize that before we were involved in this group.
I can imagine it was my natural instinct before recovery to compare rather than identify. And the fact that you were able to identify with these people is beautiful. What about you, Jules?
So for me, I really, truly believe that rehab wouldn't help me. I truly believe that community was something that I did not need. I really, really isolated and tried to do things on my own. So I went to AA for a year out of treatment because it made everybody around me feel better. Not for me. I didn't really enjoy it. It was like, okay, I got some things out of it, like whatever. But I only went once a week. Once I got my 1 year coin, I peaced out because I didn't like how they talked about maintenance and a lot of other things. And I didn't go to another like support group, recovery meeting, anything for like the next 7 years, unless somebody called me up and said, hey, I relapsed, or hey, so and so needs to go to a meeting or whatever. But that would be my first instinct would be like, okay, let's go to a meeting because like that's all I knew to do too. So if we weren't doing this meeting, I wouldn't have really, I mean, if we weren't doing this group, I wouldn't have really realized how much I actually really genuinely do need connection. And like Emily said, finding her people, like so many people in our group have said that they found their we in recovery, which is like what they couldn't find before. It's just like, oh my God, that means I can't even explain what that means to me. So just knowing that I need genuine human connection, I really didn't know that I needed it. I isolated so much before, and these meetings have really brought me a way to focus on myself in a healthy way and to come back and to reflect to them the things that I'm going through and them to support me through it. And knowing that I want to come back and remain accountable to them about certain things, I don't really struggle with wanting to take drugs every day anymore. I struggle with my addiction in other ways with sex and love and relationship. And being able to come back to these meetings and say, I didn't go meet up with him like I wanted to or whatever, and be honest with them. That just means everything to me. I'm just growing. Like without this group, I don't know that I'd be growing as much as I am.
We're all growing at our own pace and getting it out in our own words. Speaking of growing, thinking of where Swift Steps is now, where would you like it to grow in the next couple of years?
Oh, I would love for it to grow as big as possible. I want it to reach all the Swifties that are the right audience. I want it to reach all the Swifties that would love it. So I would like to grow it as big as possible. I don't know exactly what that means, but in the near future, we do have a lot of fun, exciting things coming up. We're going to be rolling out products in the next couple weeks, teasing some things. We're really excited about that. So we're starting to do a slow build now, but we want it to be as big as possible and to reach as many people as possible. But we don't know exactly what that looks like because we're still very, very new. It's still under 6 months for us. So we're still coming up with like all these ideas, but we do have some stuff that's coming out in the next 2 weeks. So that's an exclusive. You're the first one to hear it.
Ooh, well, I can't wait. As you guys know, especially, I can only imagine like what it would be like to get like an endorsement from Taylor Swift herself.
Oh my
like
God.
To you both.
Imagine.
I'm just lighting up. I mean, and what do you like when you close your eyes at night and you're dreaming of where Swift Steps will take you? What does it look like?
Oh my gosh, we live in a big pink Barbie house and we quit our jobs and we can have meetings all day long. And one day we'll go on retreats with all of the people in our community and meet everybody in person and have Taylor parties, sober Taylor parties. And oh my God.
Okay, I was being professional, but let me be delusional now with you. Like that's actually the thought. Like those are the thoughts that we've had. Like, oh my God, we'll have a reality show where they like film our meetings and they get to see like what it's really like for people in recovery, and like we'll just bear all of our shit out because like we're good at being who we are, and like being honest is good, and people will be able to relate. And so yeah, the pink Barbie house and being able to run meetings all day and do virtual retreats or to travel or like. I don't even know. Like maybe there could be, we talk about how we do this, that we always do this and we call it the chain of hearts, and we sing a Taylor song about us and shout us out at a concert. Like we have all these delusions. So we hope it goes to all
I'm
those
gonna call them
places.
delusional. You never know. They always say you can never people tend to overshoot how much they think they can accomplish in 1 year, but they always undershoot what they can accomplish in 5. So like in 5 years, you can't even imagine right now what this could bring. And I believe in you.
Thank you.
Imagine if we meet her. That's the ultimate goal.
Well, I was gonna say, like, what does that look like? It looks like us in a room with her and her being happy. Like, I just don't ever want to upset her. I want her to be happy about it.
All right. Well, who knows? While we're promoting the episode, maybe we'll get like the Taylor Swift life year post.
Oh my God, I would die.
And Any last final words for people who are on the fence, maybe about whether or not they should check out the Swift Steps? What might you tell them to urge them over to the website, which I'll link over to for them to check out?
Well, right now our meetings are totally free. We are for a week, and anybody who comes, they come back. They love it. They always say, "I wasn't going to share it today, but I feel so safe here, and I can't believe I'm sharing this. I never told anybody this before." Like, we hear that kind of stuff all the time. So I think that it's just a vibe that people really feel welcome in, and they feel safe. And if you're on the fence, I think just check out a meeting, come see what it's about. And you don't have to share. You can leave the camera off, listen to us like we're a podcast. We don't care. Just come get the message.
Yeah, and
Good.
you don't have to be also a huge Swiftie. If you need this kind of support, you just can't be a hater. But if you want to come for the support, we don't only talk about Taylor, but we just know those people are safe. So that was
Exactly.
great. Why?
I would be very shocked if a hater found you through me, because I have yet to encounter haters that tune into me for more than a minute or two anyway.
I thought that.
Well, yes, I definitely recommend everyone check them out. If the Taylor sounds awesome or Swift Step sounds awesome, I think that you two are doing awesome things for the community. So I appreciate you both are definitely sober heroes in my book.
Oh, thank you so much. Please.
And if you're listening to this episode on release day, make sure you're also going to be joining us because we'll be on Instagram later today. And if you're listening to this on the replay, check out our timelines because it'll be there. I'll link over to the Swift Steps Instagram and website and all of that in the show notes so they can follow both of you, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Do you consider yourself a Swiftie? You might not be converted to Taylor Swift's music now, but hopefully you've opened your mind about a different recovery community or a different possibility out there. When next time you find someone who is a Swiftie, you might tell them about this new exciting thing that they can try out that's online. So thank you so much, girls, for joining me. It was a pleasure. And thank you, listeners, for tuning into another episode of Gay A. Make sure you stick around and subscribe and follow wherever you're listening so you can get new episodes when they come out every single Thursday, because I am having Richard Addison on to talk about the 3 T's of his recovery. So until then, stay sober.